Good evening, this is Brown at IF Brown, and tonight we are going to be talking about Robocop, the 20th anniversary edition on DVD. So, this is one of my favorite movies from when I was growing up, and I'm happy to say that it's a movie that still holds up, to me even as an adult. And it's also, really nice to see that this movie that has rightly gone on to be regarded as not only an 80s classic, but a classic movie in general, is still, finding, its audience, amongst, I guess you could say a newer generation, whether it be, younger individuals or, just people who normally don't, branch out into science fiction, but at the very least, if nothing else, you look online, look on YouTube, amongst other places, it's really cool to see, people's, reactions to watching this movie for the first time. So, that was, always, good for the heart, so to speak. So anyway, the story, takes place in Detroit, and it's kind of in the near future. It still looks like the 1980s, but there's just enough changes to technology to where it's like, okay, this is kind of a possible future, that kind of thing. And so there's this company called OCP that kind of runs everything. And just imagine if Disney and Apple had a baby together. It'd be something like OCP most likely. So anyway, though, they have many interests, and they have their fingers in many pies. And amongst other things, they're at the moment they run the police department. And on the surface, this is a wonderful thing, because they're pushing for all this innovative technology, to be applied to, whatever fields they're invested in. But on the downside, though, behind the scenes, they, don't really care about the rank and file police officers who are, getting, slammed, by, this crime wave, that's been, going on, throughout the city. And as a lot of officers are saying, it's like we're fighting a war out here. And so, in the public interests of giving something back, to the police department, Dick Jones, one of the executives and the number 2 of OCP, he and his team have created this robot called Ed 209, which is this monstrous looking urban pacification droid. And this is initially the robot that they're going to be using to assist the police department, and especially in their grand scheme to create Delta City, which is basically a bright shiny city that's going to basically replace what is currently the ghetto of Old Detroit. And that's where the crime wave is at its worst. And so that's the idea anyway. But unfortunately, Ed 209 malfunctions and kills someone during a live demonstration, in a boardroom, I might add. And so naturally, the old man who runs the company is pretty pissed off at Dick Jones, because there's millions of dollars that have just been lost, due to this malfunction. Never mind someone actually getting killed right in front of them. But that's when another guy, another executive, guy by the name of Bob Morton, chimes in and says, "Not necessarily, sir. You see, my team and I have this, program, designed, to basically counteract instances like this, and we have, an idea that, we can actually, have something ready for you, as soon as it's required." And so, the old man says, well, hey, have your team, throw something together, get your plans together and show me what you got. And one of the things that's necessary for this, program, which is called the Robocop program, is that, there are quote unquote volunteers in the police department that are placed in prime risk areas. Basically what that translates to is, some poor schmuck has just been transferred in from another precinct, and basically is, put into the meat grinder deliberately, except, of course, the police department themselves don't know that this is what's going on, but, OCP, since they're running everything, they're like, okay, you can put Joe Schmo over here, and a banana over there, and yeah, we have Robocops. And so that's the twisted plan. And so they soon have a volunteer in the form of Officer Alex Murphy, who had just been transferred over to this precinct in Old Detroit, and he and his partner Ann Lewis are, this is their first time working together, mind you. They end up running afoul of a ruthless criminal by the name of Clarence Boddicker, and he and his crew, basically they have a penchant for drugs, robbing banks, and especially killing police officers. They really get off on that shit. It's so pardon my language, but yeah. Anyway, they Murphy and Lewis, they managed to find the guys in their hideout, but unfortunately for them, Lewis is incapacitated and Murphy is horrifically murdered, and we're talking by way of multiple shotgun rounds, point blank. And basically he's dead, and both legally and literally. But since he was one of the unknowing volunteers for this OCP project, he is the first Robocop, as rebuilt by Bob Morton and his team over at OCP. And so, Robocop, Alex Murphy now as Robocop, comes online, and he's taken to the police department, where he was originally, transferred, go figure, and, ends up, being put through his paces, fighting crime, and he's actually doing a really good job of it. And, crime starts to go down, the public starts to, feel more confident in the police department, and, the police, themselves, they're, sort of 50-50, because on one hand, they don't like the idea of necessarily being replaced by a super cop, but at the same time, they like the fact that, they now have someone who, can actually, fight fire with fire, and so, things are actually, kind of looking up for Old Detroit for a change. But things start to get, sketchy when, Robocop starts to have nightmares and flashbacks to, who he used to be as an ordinary human being, aka Alex Murphy. And amongst other things, he starts to remember who killed him. And so, on one hand, he follows his programming in, fighting crime, regardless of, where it leads, but he also starts to, go on a quest for, revenge and justice even, because, Lord knows how many people have been killed by, Clarence Boddicker and his crew. But there's a little bit more to it than that, in the sense that, Clarence Boddicker and his gang, they might have been the ones who killed him, but they were also working for, someone higher up in the food chain with OCP, namely Dick Jones. And so, yeah, that's where things get complicated. And that's I'm just going to leave it right there as far as the story goes. But no, so this was a really cool movie. It's, I mean, on one hand, it's a great '80s action science fiction movie. Definitely not for kids. I mean, the profanity is off the charts. So is the blood and gore. But I mean, in a way, that's as far as the action goes. I mean, it's part of the appeal. But there's also a lot of substance to it, a lot more substance than you would ordinarily think for a movie like this. Because there's a lot of satire that comes into play. And since it was made in the '80s, the screenwriters Edward Neumeier and Michael Miner, excuse me, the two of them, they came up with a screenplay in which, they were able to tell, a really cool science fiction story, but they were also, able to, make fun of a lot of the, problems that society had at the time. And someone who was involved with making the movie, I believe, even called Robocop fascism for liberals, because on one hand, I mean, you've got this avenging armored savior fighting crime and leaving a bloody trail in his wake, but at the same time though, it's slamming capitalism, because the company OCP, I mean, it's like capitalism taken up to 11, in the sense that it's big business running everything. And you see like a lot of the problems that come into play with that. And it's something that whether you're Republican or Democrat, liberal or conservative, you can actually appreciate that, because I mean, look what's going on right now with Disney. I mean, shoot, those guys are they've got their hand in just about every pie, and it's pretty spooky, how much, weight they carry in, society, as well as far as, what we use in technology and, what have you. But yeah, so I mean, even though this movie was made in the '80s, I mean, in terms of, the concerns about, capitalism, gone awry, I mean, or just big business gone awry, I mean, it's still pretty spot on, even though it was made in 1987, and this was during the Reagan era, and so yeah, it's definitely like a little snapshot from the '80s, but it's something that still has some social relevance, and also especially with in the movie this Detroit, or this old Detroit that's, kind of a war zone. I mean, you look at what's going on in Detroit right now, and, it's this, art imitating reality, reality imitating art. Yeah. So, still kind of close to home. But anyway, though, so the director was a guy named Paul Verhoeven. And he is a gentleman, a Dutch gentleman, and he tends to make very provocative movies, and sometimes they manage to say something about the human condition in a sort of absurd manner, but when he's working I guess through a focused lens, or when he's got some screenwriters who are able to take that chaotic energy and sort of focus it, he turns out some good movies. I mean, Robocop is definitely one of them. I would say Total Recall and Starship Troopers would be some of his other works that are held in similar regard. But yeah, he does he did a really good job of making a movie that on one hand it goes from bloody hilarious, namely when the Ed 209 robot malfunctions and obliterates, some poor yuppie, in a boardroom meeting, and we're talking the guy is just splattered all over the place. It's so, it's like, yeah, on one hand, it's ominous and terrifying to watch this thing in action, but then when you're actually seeing it happen, I mean, it's like, it's so over the top that, I mean, you can't help but laugh at it. I mean, granted, it helps to have a strong stomach, but at the same time, you're just like, oh my God, the guy's dead already, and this robot's still just, pulverizing him, with, about 1 million rounds of ammo, and it's just crazy. And so it's like, you got that level of violence, but then you have that same extreme amount, being used in a scene where, for example, when, Murphy is killed. I mean, that scene, was horrifying to watch. I mean, through the way that, actors, are playing the scene. But, then, because we've gotten to know Murphy as a man, and we can, relate to his character, and just seeing him cut down so horrifically in this manner, I mean, it would have been bad enough if it had just been impersonal shotgun fire, but this was done by a group of criminals who, they clearly love what they're doing. These guys, I mean, this makes their day. I mean, torturing someone like this, by way of multiple shotgun rounds, and they clearly enjoy it. And so, I mean, that, amongst other things, makes the scene a lot more horrific, because you're seeing, just how depraved these individuals are. And then you have, of course, the, blood and gore, that results in the scene. And, so I really have to, applaud, Verhoeven and his crew of people for being able to make a movie that has such an extreme level of violence that can be, on one hand, bloody hilarious, but then, go from that to, oh my God, you're stunned, so, so yeah, and then, you had, one of the other things that, is so, well done in this movie is that, as much as it makes fun of society, at the time, and, can still be seen as, a dig at society today, there's actually quite a bit of humanity in this movie. I mean, once the bloodshed kind of, dies down for a bit, but I mean, a big part of that, I mean, of course, is the screenwriters. I mean, they make an effort to, give the characters, some believability, some quirks and mannerisms, to where it's like, hey, these seem like flesh and blood people, and then but then of course you have Peter Weller, and what is, definitely a career best performance for him, because on one hand, he goes from, Alex Murphy, kind of the new guy on the block. I mean, you get the idea that, I mean, he's, served as a police officer for a decent amount of time, but this is his first day in the new precinct, and so, I mean, he's getting to know his way around, he's getting to know his, new partner, in Lewis, and, he seems like a pretty cool guy, nice guy, he's got a wife and kid at home, and, he's wanting to, be a good role model for his boy, and so it's like, we get to like his character, and then, when he gets murdered, it's just, it's heartbreaking, because we've gotten to know him, and we know that what he's lost. But then when he becomes Robocop, though, that's when his acting takes on a whole new level, because, amongst other things, behind the scenes, in order to, be able to get into character for the role, he actually, worked with a mime, a professional mime, to, be able to, get, the movements and mannerisms down, because, the suit he was wearing, I forgot exactly how heavy this thing was, but it was very confining, and it limited his movement. And so, he was having to, adapt and adjust, his, body accordingly, in terms of how he moved and what have you. And, and it turns out he was also losing, like, in real life, like he was actually losing like a few pounds in water, or I should say several pounds of water, just because of how hot he was in the suit. And so they had to like put a little fan in, I think it might have been the back or something, to keep air circulation going. But no, I mean, the guy was a trooper, and he really pulled it off, because when he's going to work as Robocop, I mean, just the way he moves, his mannerisms, his gestures, I mean, you really do believe that this is a brand new cutting edge cyborg, and that's out to fight crime. And also, another thing, that Peter Weller does so well is, even though that the helmet, covers from like here down, but you see his mouth. All you see is his mouth. So I mean, other than say the way he moves, you only have like say his mouth to go by in terms of what kind of emotions he's expressing, and he does a very good job in conveying what's going on in his character's head, because when he's before he starts having flashbacks, I mean, he does a great job, doing, playing, the robot, the machine, but then when he starts having flashbacks and having nightmares about who he used to be as Murphy, his movements become a little more, twitchy, or, he become, you visibly see him become on edge, and the way his mouth moves, or if there's like a frown or something, like I mean, there's a scene that for me just aced it for me. It was when he finds out where so Robocop, he finds out who used to be and where he used to live, and so he goes there to try and see if he can find something, and like closure or something. And he finds that his wife and kid, they've moved on. I mean, because he's been dead, but it's like the house is for sale, and he's walking through it, and he starts having these flashbacks to interacting with his son, and his wife, and just the way Peter Weller conveys the confusion that the Robocop character's feeling, just the way he's moving, looking around, and just in a way it's like he's terrified, and because he's realizing that this was once his life, and then when he realizes who he had, who loved him, and that he's never going to be able to get them back, it's just it's heartbreaking, because I mean, you feel his character's loss, and just through, like I said, movements, and facial expression, just through his mouth. I mean, you really feel for the guy, and and that scene, the first couple of times I saw that scene, I mean, I'll admit I got a tear in my eye. That's how emotionally poignant the scene was. And I mean, I'm not saying you have to get a tear in your eye if you watch it, but I mean, if you don't feel something in that scene specifically, there might be something wrong, but anyway, though, so yeah, Peter Weller, easily one of the best things about the movie. He makes it so you had good direction, good writing, and good acting, a good lead actor. And so everyone else, quits themselves rather well. I mean, you got Nancy Allen as Officer Lewis, Murphy's, partner, for a brief amount of time, and you see that she's the kind of character who she can handle herself fairly well in a dangerous situation some of the time, of course, but she's only human though, and she's not invincible. But there's also a good amount of compassion, there on her part, because, it's like she, warms up to Murphy, when, he's telling her about his family. And, then, once this Robocop, comes into the precinct and, is working with the police, she starts to pick up on certain things, like the way he, handles his gun, and that it's something along the lines of what Murphy did. And she kind of puts two and two together that this guy is in fact Murphy brought back to a form of life. And you see how she's trying to reach out to him and help him to remember. And that's really says something. I mean, especially the fact that they only worked together for one day, before Murphy was killed, but she was wanting to help him, because she wasn't able to save him. And you kind of get the idea that by trying to help him remember who he was, that she might be trying to make up for that failure, and she also has some pretty good banter with some of her colleagues. And then so yeah, I mean, Nancy Allen, she does a really good job in the part. She's both tough and compassionate. And I remember she was the bad girl in the movie Carrie, Brian De Palma movie, classic horror movie. So I remember seeing her in Carrie a while back and thinking, my God, she's a witch with a B. so and then you see her in RoboCop though, and it's like, she's a really kind woman, or at least it kind of made reminded me of just how good of an actress she was. She could play both evil and good, so she did really good. And then of course, you had Ronnie Cox as Dick Jones. And this guy, he initially, I think, played more good guy roles, like he was in Deliverance, one of the more, I guess you could say, morally upright, individuals in that movie. And then you have him in, I think it was called In the Line of Duty, the FBI murders. He played one of the police officers in that movie. And he was really good in that. He was kind of like one of the leaders. So he's really good at playing nice, morally upright individuals. Excuse me, sorry. But then you see him in this. It's like, brother, you are a bad guy. Because basically, he's a boardroom executive, a corrupt boardroom executive, taken up to 11. And he has the whole public facade of the charismatic individual, where the public can see, hey, I'm a nice guy, I'm trying to get back to the community. But behind all that though, he's basically only caring about the bottom line, which in his case is money. And he doesn't care how many people get killed in botched boardroom demonstrations. He doesn't care about people being displaced. He doesn't care about loss of jobs, loss of life. All he cares about is spare parts for 20 years and things like that. So it's like you kind of get the idea that if not the whole company in general, then he himself is knowingly putting out bad product, just for the sake of, say, making money off of it, as opposed to, say, trying to make a product that actually works, so because I guess if you make a product that works, then, problems decrease, the problems go down. And if the problems go down, well, hey, eventually profits will. I mean, I'm guessing that's the logic. But no, I mean, Ronnie Cox does a really good job as Dick Jones, and is basically, you could tell he's having fun with the part, but he really comes across as also a scary guy as well, because, I mean, he's willing to, have people killed who have crossed him. And we're talking like, fellow boardroom executives and things like that, just because, hey, Joe Blow over here, you know, stepped up and, you know, took my spot, you know, that kind of thing. And so it was really, you know, cool to see how good of an actor Ronnie Cox was, and he would kind of, you know, bring a bit of that, with him in another movie that was also directed by Paul Verhoeven called Total Recall, which was a really cool Arnold Schwarzenegger movie. But yeah, Ronnie Cox, you know, he played a good bad guy in that one too. So, you know, you see him in this, and you're like, yeah, this is where your typecasting as a bad guy kind of began. But brother, you're one of the best. And so, you know, speaking of bad guys, Kurtwood Smith, aka Uncle Red from That 70s Show, he plays Clarence Boddicker. And even though, like, he's not the guy who's, you know, pulling the strings, aka, you know, Dick Jones, I mean, he's the, you know, the head rabid dog in a group of rabid dogs. And he is, you know, fantastic to watch because, I mean, Kurtwood Smith, you know, he plays, you know, Clarence Boddicker, you know, as, you know, I think he even, like in an interview, he was talking about how, you know, he always saw, you know, his character and his crew as guys who were out just having fun, you know, and you watch their portrayal in this movie, and, you know, he just leans into it, and he just, you know, there's no subtlety really, and in this instance that's a good thing though, because it's like he just goes all in. There's no redeeming features whatsoever, you know, but he's having such a good time playing the part to where it's like, on one hand, you want this guy to get what's coming to him, you know, this, you know, brutal justice, you know, but at the same time, you know, you enjoy watching him being evil. And so so yeah, he just another thing that I kind of stood out about him was, like, from a visual standpoint, you know, he's just kind of a balding, you know, bespectacled, guy, you know, that, you know, I mean, just looks like an ordinary guy that you might meet on the street, you know, but at the same time, you know, it just goes to show you that, you know, evil can, you know, take any form, you know. And so, you know, you got, you know, a geek, or a guy who looks like a geek who, you know, can gleefully, you know, orchestrate, you know, someone's death or take part in someone's death. I mean, you know, it just goes to show you, I mean, evil doesn't discriminate. So, but yeah, no, so, you know, Kurtwood Smith, you know, he was fantastic as, you know, Clarence Boddicker, and, you know, you're laughing, you know, at his antics, but then at the same time you're pulling for him to get gruesomely dispatched. So, I mean, that's a sign of a good actor, in my opinion, amongst other things, you know. But there are also some other familiar faces, you know, especially in the crew. You know, you had, let's see, Ray Wise, who, you know, most people might remember him from Twin Peaks, and you also have Paul McCrane, who played, I think his name was Dr. Romano on ER, and so, you know, you see them, you're like, hey, I saw you from that show, you know. So you got That 70s Show, you got Twin Peaks, and you got ER, you know, all being represented here, so by these guys. And also, I neglected to mention that you had the late Miguel Ferrer playing Bob Morton, the OCP executive who's headlining the Robocop program. He does a really good job in this movie because, I mean, granted, you know, he too is a corrupt corporate executive, you know, but there's a certain nuance to his character, in the sense that, you know, he's sleazy, you know, and yes, he did, you know, indirectly, you know, lead, you know, Officer Murphy into getting killed, you know, but at the same time though, when, like, say for instance, you know, you see the pride that he has in, you know, Robocop being completed, you know, it's like he's, you know, treating him like, you know, a prize winning, you know, son of his or something, something like that. And so it's like, this guy's a bad guy, but at the same time, you get the idea that his, admiration and, it's for Robocop, for his, creation, it's genuine. So I mean, if this guy has faults, his, lack of, hap his, lack of, care for Robocop, isn't one of them. But that being said, that's kind of, a small redeeming, quality of his. But that being said, I mean, there's a part where, I mean, spoiler alert, he ends up getting killed by Clarence Boddicker on, Dick Jones's orders. And in the scene in question, it's like leading up to it, I mean, you see just how corrupt he is, but then, once he's actually getting, dispatched, it was a moment where I was like, okay, you had something coming, and you're guilty of sin, but at the same time, I kind of feel sorry for you because, I mean, yeah, you deserve something to happen, but not that. Oh God, painful. So yeah, and that was a lot of that. I think might have been, on one hand, just how brutal, his, dispatching was, by Clarence Boddicker. But on the other hand, a lot of that, could be, chalked up to Miguel Ferrar's acting ability, because I mean, you see that this guy, I mean, yeah, he's a corrupt, corporate executive, but at the same time, you see him reduced to, I guess, sobbing, begging, into, human being, who is just flesh and blood. And that was, some pretty intense stuff right there. So yeah, it's like bad guy, but you kind of felt sorry for him once he actually ended up getting dispatched, or at least I did, just, he did deserve that much, but, also, there are a couple other people. Robert DeQuee, he played Sergeant Reed, the guy in charge of the precinct, and I've seen him in a couple other things. But the guy's always been a good character actor, and I liked him in this movie because he's the kind of guy who he actually gives a damn about trying to fight crime, but also to protect the population of old Detroit. And he knows that the police department is more or less fighting losing battle, but he's doing everything in his power to try and do right by his police officers. And when whenever one of them gets killed, I mean, it hurts him. I mean, and he's the kind of guy who he can't show too much compassion because of his position, but at the same time though, that the officers know that he cares about them. And I like, there's a little scene where after Lewis, after she's been chewed out by Bob Morton and some of the other OCP jerks, after they've gone, he says, "Hey, don't worry about it, kid. This guy's a serious asshole." And she's like, and you look on her face after he says that, it's just gratitude, like, thanks, boss, for having my back. And so I like that, about his character, so that was another nice performance there. Also, Dan O'Hurley, I hope I'm saying his name right. He plays the old man, aka the guy who runs OCP. And I remember I saw him in Halloween 3 Season of the Witch as the main bad guy. And so, you got a guy in that movie who, has a, folksy, grandfatherly demeanor, but is actually, a bloodthirsty individual. And then you got him in this movie where, I mean, yeah, he's in charge of a company that is undoubtedly corrupt, but at the same time, though, I mean, in his own twisted way, he cares about the legacy of his company. and ultimately he does, want, you know, the, betterment of society. It's just that he's not exactly unwilling to, step on people to get this done, but he's not exactly a, I mean, he's definitely not a good guy in the sense that he's in charge of OCP. But at the same time, he's not a straight up bad guy either. So it was, a nice bit of gray area with him. So, I mean, yeah. So all in all, you got some really good characters in this movie, both on the, good side and on the bad side. And, you also, there's a lot of, you see that there's like a lot of genuine camaraderie with certain characters. I mean, like with the police officers, when when you see that them interacting with one another, even if it's just for little bits, where they're talking about, hey, is so-and-so going to make it after, after being shot and all, you hear them talking about stuff like that, or, you hear about them, trying to, or maybe organize a strike, and protest, because of, their mistreatment of by OCP, or, even when, some of them, try and stand up for Robocop, when he's been basically marked for termination. I mean, you see how, these guys, it's like, they kind of look out for their own. And, while some of them, it's like, are the kind of that just follow orders, but you also see that, a lot of them, are believably human. And, that's something that, I thought was pretty cool, because, I mean, you saw, the police officers as, ordinary, people, but, trying to do, their jobs in, a war zone. And also another thing on the other side of the spectrum, the bad guys. I mean, even though these guys are just straight up evil, I mean, you see them as a, working together as, a group, and as you get the idea that they've been kind of, friends for a really long time. And because they all have like certain chemistry with one another, like they joke around. I mean, granted, they're very sick and twisted jokes, but at the same time, it's like, they all kind of have each other's back, unless, say, one of them does something that really screws things up, in which case. But other than that, though, it's like, hey, you do right by them, they'll do right by you. That is, if you're one of them, that kind of thing. It's a very twisted camaraderie, but I like seeing that in this movie as well. And so another thing is, I mean, there's always things I'm thinking of here, but like another thing is the music in this movie by Basil Palladorius, fantastic composer. You have this, score, that, manages to be, intense and epic, and then, and ominous, but then, you have, something, it'll go from all that and then to, sad and heartbreaking. And so basically, it covers a whole bunch of, emotion in the movie and what the characters are going through. And I like this guy's work. I think this might have been the first time I heard his music, and it's always stuck with me. But he also did the music for Conan the Barbarian, the Arnold Schwarzenegger movie, where James Earl Jones was Thulsa Doom. I mean, that's another good movie, by the way. But no, his score in that movie, was phenomenal. And, Robocop, I think, it's, right up there with that. So yeah, really good, music score. It says a lot about what's going on in the movie, both the action as well as, the characters. So, Paul Verhoeven had actually worked with him, I think, on another movie. I think it was called Flesh and Blood. But, so the two of them definitely had a history together. And so, it's like, hey, it worked once, let's see if it works again. And sure enough, it did. And also, the stop motion animation in this movie, especially when it comes to the Ed 209 robot is phenomenal. And, it was done by a gentleman named Phil Tippett and his crew. And, they do a really good job of, crafting this ominous looking, robot, that, and the way it moves, it's kind of, sketchy, and, it's got you can definitely tell it's being, done by stop motion, but it's top-notch stop motion. And so whenever you see this thing moving, there's a very, nightmarish, feel, like when you're seeing this thing coming at you, and it's sort of just lurching towards you, and it's it's a wonder to behold. I mean, both, from the fact is that Ed 209, looks as ominous as it does, just by its presence alone. But then with the stop motion, it has this very surreal quality, in how it moves and how it's walking or running. And, then of course, you have, its voice, where it, it's like barking a command, or it's growling. This is a pretty terrifying puppy, so to speak. But no, so the stop motion, though, they, did a really good job with it. And I mean, some people might be of the mind that, OMG, this is an 80s movie, it has stop motion, this is like so lame, OMG, I'm going to take a selfie, just, screw that. Here's the thing, it's like, okay, how, say for instance, you look at an old, episode of Star Trek, like, say, I think it was, like, I saw this with my folks, the Tholian Web, and I could definitely tell the special effects, I mean, were very dated by today's standards, but, seeing, the special effects in that episode, I was impressed by how well done they were for their time. And that's the thing, it's like, you can recognize that something is dated, but you can also appreciate the craftsmanship for when it came out. And that's, I think, is the case here. I mean, me personally, in this instance, the stop motion does not bother me at all. I mean, I definitely recognize that special effects have, progressed and evolved, since 1987, and they've gotten better. But at the same time, though, one of the standouts of this movie is the stop motion, animatronic work of Ed 209. And that's a big part of what brings such, an intimidating character to life. And so, that to me was not a problem, and was in fact part of the charm. But, for those who are of the mindset that, anything that's older than, I don't know, 2007 or something like that, is, irrelevant. It's like, no. Here's, forget that. It's just, you've got to be able to respect, the quality and craftsmanship that goes into, bringing something to life, and even if, you can, accept and realize that, things have improved a lot since, something was originally done, that doesn't take away from the impact that it had when it came out, or, even to some extent, now even. But yeah, just, the stop motion, for Ed 209, Ed 209 was an awesome, evil robot, but also just, top-notch stop motion was used to bring it to life. So hats off to Phil Tippett and his crew. And I really enjoyed this movie. There's just, so much to like about it. And there was something else I was going to say, is that, I mean, it's one of those movies that, for me at least, I mean, it's one of my favorite movies, but on the occasions I've watched it, I mean, I tend to pick up something, that I didn't necessarily, notice that the other time I watched it, like, I mean, this is, I mean, for instance, I mean, showing you how good of an actor Peter Weller is. But I mean, there's a really memorable scene where he rescues a woman, who is in the process of, you know, she's this close to being raped, by these, two punks. And one of them, he has her by the throat. He's holding a knife to her throat, and it's the other guy saying, he's gonna kill her, he's gonna kill her. And so the Robocop, though, he takes aim with his gun. And so, originally, I was reading about this, like behind the scenes stuff. But originally, the people, the guys who were making the movie, they're like, okay, just have Robocop shoot him in the head, or make a bloody headshot, that kind of thing. But one of the screenwriters was like, nah, have him shoot the guy in the dick. And so, what he ends up doing is he shoots, his targeting screen comes up, and he aims at the woman's dress, and he shoots. And next thing you know, the guy who was holding her, he's holding where his junk used to be, and he's screaming in pain, and the woman's looking through the hole in her dress, looking at the guy, looking at the hole, and then looks up at Robocop. And while the guy's on the ground screaming, and his buddies on the ground's like, okay, I surrender, and all that, she runs up to Robocop, and she's hysterical, and she's in tears, saying thank you, and it's like she doesn't even care. This guy's a machine. She's hugging him, and it's really heartwarming. It's like they saved her, and she's thankful for it and all. But this is where Peter Weller's work as an actor comes in. It's like after she's thanked him, and she's holding him, just hysterical, he sort of just looks down, and his voice, and I noticed this the last time I watched it, but his voice, it kind of softens. Like, it still has this mechanical, loud quality to it, but it softens just enough to where you could tell that he's trying to put her at ease, and he's saying something to the effect of, madam, you have suffered an emotional shock. I will notify a rape crisis center. And some movies would have the hero just kind of walk off to do the next mission or whatever right after that. But no, I mean, the camera just lingers on that for a sec, and you get the idea that Robocop waited with her until someone was able to come help her before he went on to do his mission. So I really like that. One, it's very heartwarming to see this only partially human creation taking the time to comfort a near rape victim, and because he recognizes that this woman's been traumatized, and just that like, I guess it could just be programming, or it could be some of the humanity that's maybe starting to come up to the front, but it was really nice to see that. And also, of course, a rapist getting his junk blown off, always fun to see. So, but yeah, anyway, yeah, just like I said, there's so much to like about this movie. You got your action, you've got your satire, you've got thought-provoking science fiction, you've got really good acting, a really good score, and just a really good story, and just an all-around great movie. And so I'm gonna go ahead and give RoboCop 5 out of 5 stars. This was an excellent movie, and I'm really glad to say that. I mean, it's one of my favorites from when I was younger that still holds up. And thank you very much for taking the time to check out my review. Y'all got any questions, comments, let me know. Y'all have a good night. And that's a car alarm out there. It's always crazy. All right, anyway, good night. Have a good night. Bye.